spent 28 years as an Army chaplain on active duty. Now I teach at the Army Chaplain School at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And in the course of my teaching there, I ran across memoirs of Union and Army and Confederate Army chaplains. So Mercer University Press was kind enough to publish an edition of original memoirs by Confederate and Union chaplains. This is a Confederate volume. We have a Union volume that parallels it. What we wanted to do was to get an idea of how the chaplains saw the Civil War, both Union and Confederate sides. One of the surprises, and I won't bore you with this, but one of the surprises is many of the chaplains, many of the clergy, were opposed to the secession of states from the Union, and many of them were opposed to slavery. But when their congregations were called up in the draft of 1862, many of these clergymen went with their congregations because they loved their people and they were willing to go into combat with them. This grave is a grave of a special chaplain. His name was Francis Milton Kennedy. It's on the front. He was born in 1834, died in 1880. He had a doctorate in divinity. Kennedy was the son of a Methodist preacher from South Carolina, and he spent his first few days taking tracts, religious tracts, by train from Charlotte, North Carolina to Richmond to pass out to the soldiers in the Army in Northern Virginia. In 1863, he was asked if he would be the chaplain of a regiment that didn't have one, so he joined the 28th North Carolina Regiment. Now that regiment was one of several that was very heavily engaged in combat. They were at almost all of the major battles of the Army of Northern Virginia after 1863, including the Battle of Gettysburg. At Gettysburg, the 28th North Carolina was part of Pender's division. It was the left wing of Pickett's charge across the fields into the artillery of the Union Army. Chaplain Kennedy left his memoir of that event, and I'd just like to read you, if I could, about 4 sentences from his description, which I think will demonstrate his view of what was going on. His diary is arranged chronologically, so all you have to do is follow the dates. This is what he was writing on the 3rd of July, 1863, as the Confederate Army launched its attack against the Union artillery at Gettysburg. Today, a general attack was made on the enemy's position, resulting in a failure to dislodge them, and a fearful loss on our side, which was the side of the enemy we don't know. Our brigade suffered very heavily, my regiment losing a great many killed and wounded. I occupied an eminence upon which General Lee was stationed. What he's talking about is he was sitting on a hill next to General Lee, from which I had a very good view of the battle. The cannonading was fearful, the scene terribly sublime. I rode my horse this afternoon trying to find a new hospital, which was established today. By some means, the medical department was badly managed today, causing a great deal of unnecessary pain and trouble to the wounded. Our brigade suffered heavily, as indeed the entire army. The enemy had an impregnable position, and we attempted to storm it, charging 1.5 miles over an open field right in the face of scores of cannon. The men came within a few yards of the enemy's entrenchment, but had to fall back for want of men enough to hold them. This day's work is the mistake of the campaign, and it'll be well for us if our repulse does not grow into our disaster, which of course it did. Chaplain Kennedy stayed with the Army of Northern Virginia until it surrendered at Appomattox. There were 40 chaplains at Appomattox that surrendered with the Army. After the war, he went back to South Carolina, and because he was a well-educated man with an honorary doctorate of divinity, that's what the DD means, they asked him in South Carolina if he would be the editor of a church newspaper called the South Carolina Advocate. And he agreed to do that, but Columbia had been burned by Sherman largely, and the presses were destroyed, so they moved the newspaper here to Macon, which had largely been spared from Sherman's wrath. So he came here to publish the South Carolina Methodist newspaper, joined the publication of the Georgia Wesleyan Christian Advocate, also published here. So both of those newspapers were published in Macon. He lived here until he died, and then he was buried in this, what we call a bed grave. This is interesting to me because of the symbols. Anybody know what the scallop shells mean other than Shell Oil Company? That's a symbol of a Christian pilgrim. The seashells are pilgrims, and the anchor, which I thought originally was Confederate Navy, but it isn't. The anchor is a symbol of Christian hope. And on the back, to symbolize that, is the Bible verse from the 11th chapter of John. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And then it has his initials, Francis Milton Kennedy, on the back. So he has a Bible verse to reinforce the symbol of hope, and a symbol of pilgrimage simply being a pilgrimage from this life into the next life. And I hope that reinforces your major theme in the course.
So much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming by. Thanks for your help, by the way.
What was on that stand?
Ma'am?
What was on the stand?
It was probably a vase. You know, one of those, what can I say, urn.
Yeah, we've been seeing lots of things where statues or different things have been stolen off the end.
Yes.
So I was wondering if there was something there.
Yes, sir. John Brunsfield.
Thank
B.R.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming. INSFIELD. If you go to your library and ask for The Spirit Divided, I was the editor, they'll get it by interlibrary loan, and you don't have to buy it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, Thomason?
Christian pilgrim.
Yes, ma'am.
I was born 2 blocks from the Capitol in Columbia.
Oh, were you really?
Yes,
Bless your heart. Well,
back
good.
in 1936. It's
Yes,
been a long
ma'am.
time ago.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
when it was all houses.
Well, you look great, by the way.
She's in a good place. Well, not
I'm
really.
I'm 67. And I was born in 44.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm preserved.
Yes, ma'am.
After today, I'm not too
I love those initials. Those are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, they are gorgeous.
I want one of those.
Yeah, I wanted to hear it.
I
I
didn't-
had to sit over there, but
I didn't mention it, but that's his wife's grave, we think. That's why it's here.
I
She
see.
was a member of the family that owned this plot.
Clisby's.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So he died before she did, but she's buried there. It has her maiden name on it.
Yeah, I see.
Interesting. We're going to go catch up with Amanda.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, she's
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. Are you going back to Columbia after?
Tomorrow. Yes,
Tomorrow?
ma'am. It's just as hot over there.
Oh, listen, I
No
know.
air.
On that big rock it's built on.